Good morning and welcome back for some more AP Psych. This is Unit 7. This will be the last unit that gets covered on this year's AP exam. That would be the 2020 AP exam due to the changes with the curriculum being shortened because of COVID-19. So ironically, this unit here, as we're all doing remote learning, is titled Motivation and Emotion. And so that's part of it. And I've actually broken down this unit into a Unit 7A and then a Unit 7B. So Unit 7B will deal with personality, but for the next couple of lessons, we're going to be dealing with motivation and emotion. So I'm sure everyone is super motivated at home right now to be doing work and watching videos about school and psychology in general. So if you're not, try to find the inner motivation. Pretend that you are the gentleman here in the kayak and you've got a shark on your tail. And if that's the case, then hopefully you'd be pretty motivated. So first thing that we're going to explore is some basic motivational theories and then concepts. And so everyone in here has heard of the term motivation. As a student, I think this is really relative because you're kind of an expert into some of these topics by this point in time. Some of the topics are going to deal with stress, motivation, obviously, emotion. And by now, hopefully, you're probably pretty familiar with what does motivate you and what doesn't, and maybe some forms of motivational theory. You've just never kind of formalized them into the concepts you're going to hear about. But same thing for stress. There's a good chance that you know exactly what stresses you out, what doesn't, what's a major or minor stressor, what is your typical response to stress, and then also dealing with emotion, how you regulate your emotions, and what's your go-to emotion, what do you avoid, do you deal with emotions, do you bottle them up, all that kind of stuff. So first thing we're going to do, like I said, is look at some basic motivational theory. And so there's two early motivational styles, intrinsic versus extrinsic, and to basically break them down for you. Intrinsic motivation means that you have a desire to perform a task, a behavior, whatever it is, for its own sake. You enjoy it for the sake of enjoying it. If you read books, maybe you read books because you enjoy reading, versus if you won't read a book unless there is some kind of incentive attached. Maybe if you read a book, you find out that there's a prize after completion of reading a book, or you get some kind of payment. That's not really intrinsic. You're not doing it because you enjoy it. You're doing it because there's basically a string attached. And so that string is the reward. So that's the difference really between intrinsic and extrinsic. Again, intrinsic, you enjoy doing something for the sake of it. Extrinsic, you're doing that task. You're motivated for something because of the reward or the fear or threat of punishment that you're going to end up receiving. Also, for motivation, we have a motivation from a leadership perspective. And so one day, or maybe currently, depending on if you have a job or not, but you may have a boss that assumes a certain theory of motivational leadership and how they manage and how they treat their employees. And so if they were to assume using theory X of motivation, basically the idea here is that employees are basically lazy, they make a lot of errors, and the only way they would actually work harder is if they were getting some kind of financial incentive. So this is basically saying that workers are extrinsically motivated. I'm just going to adjust my camera here a little bit. I'm showing myself a little off center. So anyways, the manager who utilizes theory X point of view basically says that their employees are only going to work harder if they get more money. That's the only way they're really going to be motivated. And that's just simply not true. I mean, it does depend on the type of work that you're doing, your base salary, of course, what you're already making. But there is another healthier way of running things as a manager or as a boss. And so using the theory Y form of motivation assumes that there are other ways to motivate your employees that are not just financially based. So for example, instead of having a boss who's kind of literally standing over your shoulder all the time, watching everything that you do, criticizing every little task or everything that you do, maybe utilizing theory Y would say that, you know what, an employee could actually be more motivated to do a good job if they were given the freedom to demonstrate that they're actually competent and actually able to do their job in the first place. And so That style of motivation, theory Y, basically says that it's not just about the money. Sometimes if a worker actually is allowed some freedom, and if they are allowed the boss to not hound them over their shoulder, they may actually be challenged by that. They may embrace that challenge and the freedom, and instead are more motivated by achieving this inner self-esteem and basically getting that moment to demonstrate they can do their job effectively. So those are just two theories about leadership style motivation. When we look into some more content-specific theories for AP Psych, you're going to see basically what boils down to the push versus the pull. And so the first major theory here is called drive reduction. And so all of our bodies at any point in time are usually trying to maintain what's called homeostasis. You can see here homeostasis is just basically equilibrium or stability from a physiological stance. And so what our bodies are going to try to do is to drive us towards homeostasis. If you get sick, for example, if you have a fever, your body is going to try to fight that fever. If you have a fever, you're not actually at homeostasis. So you're trying to reduce the fever. It's a state of tension, and the body is trying to reduce that state of tension internally to get you back to homeostasis. Now, this is kind of considered the internal push. It's the body's drive to push us towards a state of equilibrium or stability, but it doesn't explain all types of motivation. For example, if I'm hungry, of course, I'm going to need to eat some food. My body's going to want to try to get me to eat food in order to reduce that state of tension or that state of hunger. However, what if someone makes the comment, who has a thirst for knowledge? What about when you eat snacks when you're not hungry? This does not explain that type of behavior. And so for that, we move forward with what's called the incentive theory. The incentive theory is now the external pull. So instead of having the push, now we have an external pull. There is some kind of goal that has the capacity to motivate behavior. External factors. If I am eating a snack, even though I'm not hungry, well, why am I eating that snack? Maybe it's because it tastes really good. Why would you eat birthday cake after a huge dinner? Well, special occasion, of course. It's got to be someone's birthday, I would assume. But also, you like the taste of birthday cake. Dessert and eating dessert in general is basically an incentive motivation. People don't sit around and just eat dessert all of the time. They usually do it for special occasions, usually with a dinner. It's uncommon for someone to probably have a dessert after breakfast or after lunch when their body's actually hungry and they are in that state of tension that they want to reduce. But with dinner, after you've got a full belly, and then a waiter or waitress somewhere asks you, at a restaurant at least, would you want to get dessert? A lot of people say no because they're cheap and they want to keep the bill down. But some people say yes. It's not probably because they're still hungry. It's because they know it's going to taste good. That's the main point. So that's the external pull. We've also got instinct, evolutionary theories of motivation. So basically, we have certain levels of motivation related to achievement and affiliation, dominance, aggression, sex drives. These are all kind of things that are going to maximize reproductive success. So an instinctive or evolutionary theory about motivation is basically looking to maximize reproductive success. And we're going to look at some examples of those over the course of the next couple lessons. Human beings in general do share some motivations, but we don't share all the same motivations. So for example, when we look at a biological perspective, we pretty much all have the same needs. We have to go nourish our bodies with food, for example. We have to nourish our bodies with water. We all are biologically motivated to go to the bathroom. We share these things. But when it comes to social motivations, these are things that everyone doesn't share. For example, we all don't care about getting an A in class. This is a form of achievement need. We don't all care about getting A's or getting B's. Some people are happy to just pass with a D. Some people just care about passing in general, and they don't actually care what the grade is. So that's all just breaking down achievement needs. But we also all don't want to be surrounded by tons of friends. Some people want a small group of really close friends, and some people would rather have a large group of more distant friends. Again, these are social motivations. We don't all share the same levels, but many people do share certain social motivations. It's just different levels of those motivations. Next, we have what's called the arousal theory of motivation, and we'll be looking at a graph about this at some point. But you may have encountered a situation before where you had a very low level of arousal into a task, and as a result, you tended to not have the greatest performance. Or maybe you had too much arousal in for a task, and as a result, you were stressed, and then you could not perform at an optimal level. And so typically what happens is that if you have a very low level of arousal towards any specific task, and when we say arousal here, we're mostly talking about interest. We're not so much talking about sexual arousal, at least in this case. So if you have a very low level of arousal into a task, you're not engaged, you're not excited about it, you're probably going to be bored. That's just coming from the fact that you're not really vested into it. You're not really motivated to do much because you're bored. If you have too much arousal for a task, for example, if you get too excited for something, your body's going to actually seek to try to reduce that excitement. The reason for this is that you're likely going to underperform due to the fact that you're over interested in something. And so we're actually seeking a more optimal level of arousal, somewhere in the middle where we balance out not being bored, but not being overstimulated. And one of the ways that we see this referenced is from this diagram here. It's known as the inverted U hypothesis. And more specifically, it's called the Yerkes-Dodson law. And basically what this is trying to show you is that depending on how stimulated you are in a task or not, it's going to have a relation to your performance. So if you're very low level stimulation, you're probably bored and tired, and then your performance is low, it's weak. If you're overstimulated, now you're probably stressed and restless, and as a result, your performance is again low. So the goal is to find that sweet spot in the middle, right in there where you are being stimulated, but you're being stimulated to a point where you're most focused and most engaged. And then if you look to the left, you can see that your performance is at its highest peak. So again, usually you will see this referenced as the Yerkes-Dodson law. However, it is also sometimes referenced as the inverted U hypothesis because it is basically an upside down U. So there you have it. And finally, we conclude with when the good feelings are produced and they endure beyond the experience. So with motivation comes the discussion of what's known as altruism. How do you help out other people? Do you help out other people willingly? When you are experiencing fulfilling activities, you generally reach what's called the flow state, where you lose track of time because you're having such a good moment. You're being fulfilled in an inner level and maybe even on an outer level. And as a result, time really passes rather quickly. Choose altruism because selfishism is a lonely, cold, dark hole. Helping other people when you can usually is connected with your emotions in a positive way. Little acts of kindness here and there, sprinkled throughout the day, the weeks, the months, throughout your life, generally has been connected to living a more fulfilling and more positive life. So I would challenge you to do that during this time as best as you can. And that's pretty much going to do it for this video. So I will see you next time. As always, stay safe and adios.